Day two of padded practice, and defense is king, plus a list of players that have caught my eye and the reasons why. All this and a little bit more coming up on the 2019 RTJ, Episode 2.
Well, you made me weep, and you made me moan. Well, you caused me to leave, child, my happy home. But someday, baby, you ain't worry my life anymore.
Subscribers and listeners to episode 2 of Ren's Training Camp Journal. Of course, I am Ren. I will be your host through this journey that we take through training camp in this almost daily podcast. So let's get into it. Yesterday, I talked a little bit about how I was surprised and was eyebrow raising that they were taking Lavonte David off the field and some nickel packages and leaving Devin White out there to get 5 DBs on the field and keep their 5 guys up front. And I got a tweet or two about it, and people, I don't want to say concerned, but they were like, "Huh," just sort of like I was like, "Huh," like that's weird. Now we are starting to see, at least I did yesterday, when we've heard about this Todd Bowles multiple defense, because now what they did yesterday a lot was they would pull a interior defensive lineman off the field and then bring in that 5th defensive back to be able to keep White and Lavonte David on there. And they were playing a lot of single high safety out there without Justin Evans. But also the whole entire defense was no more than 3 yards off the ball besides that single high safety. White and David were in the A gap, and they came. And guess who dropped back in coverage to sort of fill their, middle of the field pass coverage duty? Carl Nassib. Now, if you remember Devin White's press conference, and he talked about Villa and he's going over the defense, and they're like, "You're going to ask this guy, this 300-plus pound guy, to do this?" And Devin White said, "I don't want to give away too much. It does involve running." And then Devin White said he saw him at practice, went, "Oh, okay, now I get it." I think he's talking about something like that, where VA is going to drop back in coverage. We saw Nassib, take running backs and mostly running backs last year that would flare out and they turn it into a wheel route, and he'd have to, go step for step with them down the sidelines, and he did pretty well. So, but seeing him drop back into the middle of the field was it was different. It was different for sure. But with all that pressure that came, I think the pass was knocked down. And, talking about pressure, I said it in the opening, like defense, they're bringing it. They're crushing it. Like they are putting the screws to the offensive line and the quarterbacks for sure. It feels like the defense has been playing together for like 2 years, and they just threw this offense together, all these guys, though they're talented, for like a week. And this offensive line is really still trying to figure out pickups and coverages, not coverage, but pickups on blitzes and which guy to take. And when this guy drops, the guy in front of you drops out into coverage, like, am I looking left or am I looking right? Things like that. So it's really showing the defense, laid a whooping on them. On them in practice in day 2 of pads, and it wasn't close. It was, like if you were keeping score of Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich as how good of a job they're doing, it's like 100-10. It's the defense is that dominant, and they're getting a lot of picks. They're getting a lot of hands-on balls. They're getting a lot of quote unquote, which would count as sacks. So I'd like to get into, building off that, I'd like to get into the players that I have seen on defense that are showing up. And I'll give you the reasons why. I'm going to start with Carlton Davis III. This guy's sticky. He had a pretty much like all our DBs for the past 2-3 years. They had an okay season. No one's had like a great standout season. Maybe Brent Grimes like 2-3 years ago around there. But for the guys that are here with us now, like no one's had the standout season. Carlton Davis he was okay last year. He was a rookie. Quarterback's the hardest position to transition from college to pros and all that, and I get it. But as far as being in the receiver's hip pocket, he's there all the time. He's getting a lot of hands on balls, a lot of PBUs, pass breakups. He's not getting a lot of picks, and he's dropped some. But the old adage, that's why he doesn't play wide receiver. But Carlton Davis is probably all the DBs that have been the most impressive, and that's not to say everyone else has stunk, because there's lots of DBs that are playing well. But as far as receivers getting separation on guys and disrupting passes, I think Carlton Davis has been the best so far. And again, take all this stuff with a grain of salt. It's his only second day in pads, and it's real early. Now I want to jump to VH3, Vernon Hargreaves. He is playing very well. He's adapting well back to what he played in college, the press man corner. What he's having a problem with, though, is in breaking routes, I guess I could say. So, he's playing press man, and when the receiver starts to close the gap on him, a little bit, and they, right, and they're sort of stride for stride, and right when Vernon has to decide either pop his hits open left or right, the receiver is putting their foot in the ground and breaking in, like doing a post or a deep slant, and they're separating from him. Now, on out routes and fly routes, like Vernon's all over it. Like he's got his hands on a bunch of balls, has a pick or two. But on those, eating up the space, which isn't a lot, but they eat up the space and drive him. And right when, right at that spot where Vernon sort of has to decide, like, okay, am I gonna turn my shoulders this way or that way? They stick their foot in the ground and they cut to the middle of the field, and they're losing him. And the separation is vast by NFL standards. But I feel like I'm sort of nitpicking there. Vernon looks, it's from what I've seen, and as Bucs fans we've seen since he's gotten here, this is easily the best that he's played. I want to move on to Lavonte David, who, we talked a little bit about him. He's doing really well. He's seeing, these screen passes and he's getting in passing lanes, but what he seems to be doing the best is run gap fits. The few times, and I don't mean few like one or two, like when the Buccaneers run the ball and it's running drills, it's a little sort of an edge to the defense because the Buccaneers know the Buccaneers defense know they're running the ball. Like they'll have 20, 25 plays in 11 on 11s, but they run the ball 17 times out of those 20, so the defense sort of knows what's coming. But when the running back doesn't have somebody in his face and gets to the line of scrimmage area, relatively clear, Lavonte David's there, and it's he's looking really good against the run, and he's had some really nice breakups in the passing game. But as Buccaneer fans really don't expect anything less from him. Vita Vea, he's just the offensive guard might as well just jump in Vea's lap and just, Vea's arms, and Vea just might as well just walk him back to the quarterback and lay him down at his feet, because that's what's happening more times than not. He's consistently just basically picking the guard up and laying him in the quarterback's lap. I've talked a few times on the Petercast, the main show with Brent, about how freaky strong Vea is. He's one of only like 9 or 10 or 8 guys at the combine that put up over 50 reps at 225. He's just that guy. He's just naturally strong, and he's naturally stronger than a lot of people, and even NFL guys, and you can just see it. So he's been fun to watch, and he's been impressive. And then Carl Nassib. There's been some concerns about him if he's, since he was a second round pick from the Browns, and then, they just let him go. Like, they didn't trade him to get anything for him. He comes in, I think he got 6.5 sacks last year, and it was, that was a nice surprise. But really, how good can he be? Was that 1 year just an outlier? Sort of like he was in Penn State, like he was sort of nobody, and then, 1 year I think, his last year playing for Penn State was something like 14 sacks. I'm like, where did this guy come from? but he is consistently doing his job. He's getting around the right end consistently. He would have had 2 or 3 sacks yesterday alone. So, he's looking good. And finally, I want to talk about Noah Spence. Now, I know, and I'm with you once again. This wait and see, show me, don't tell me about Noah Spence, but he could not possibly be having a better camp, and the coaches are seeing it because when the quote unquote ones or starters go out there, when it's 11 on 11s and it's Jameis and his guys and Devin White and his guys, the defensive ends are Nassib and Spence. It's not Barrett. It's not Shaquille Barrett. So Spence is already, at least very early on, or maybe just yesterday it was his day. Maybe they're rotating him. But, if they gave him the shot because of what they've seen in film and early on in practice, to go ahead and run with the ones, so to speak, he's not going anywhere because he had a fantastic practice. One thing I haven't seen yet from him is an inside move. He's basically just been doing speed outside, which is fine, because they really can't stop him. But he's going to have to learn, some inside moves. His hand technique is fine; it's good. He's you can tell he's really improved about swatting the offensive linemen. Basically, the push and rip to get around. He's got that down. But what I will say in his defense, and this goes back to Vita, is there's no room for Noah Spence to really pull an inside move. Because even if he starts on the outside, and the tackle opens his hips and starts to follow him, and he puts his foot in the ground and, either tries to do a thump move or a swim move or a spin move to get on the inside of the tackle, there's no space because, again, Vea has the guard pushed so far back. It's even though Noah's going full speed on the outside and the tackle's, trying to keep up with him on his arc, there's really no room on the inside to go because the offensive guard is there because Vea's pushing him 2, 3, 4 yards into the backfield. So that's, sort of in Noah Spence's defense about his inside move. I'll be keeping an eye on it and see. And the last guy on defense I want to talk about, and this isn't a guy that shined or reason why, but it's the defensive end draft choice, Anthony Nelson. Someone asked him on Twitter about him the other day, and I said, well, I haven't really looked at him. So I paid attention to him yesterday. Nothing spectacular, I don't know if I saw him really get around the right tackle, because that's where he's playing. He's playing against the right tackle at all yesterday, at least on the outside. I did see some really nice moves on the inside, though, but they were both running plays. He did he engaged a tackle and sort of, you've seen, it's new to me, maybe not new to you guys, but you've seen sort of defensive linemen nowadays that'll engage with the offensive lineman and grab, the inside of their jersey, like the inside or underneath their pads, and then take a step to the side and pull and yank them and kind of throw them to the side. You see it a lot in college because those guys just sometimes you're just a better, stronger athlete than the guy in front of you. You don't see it a lot in the pros, but he did that move and got inside the hole, and he was just standing there waiting for Rojo. But Rojo just kind of put his foot in the dirt again and do a boop, and Anthony was just sort of grasping for air. But it was a nice move to see. And then one time they were running away from him, and he split the tight end tackle block. He's not going against the ones, but still, he split that double team. If allow me to get away with that, because I'm not sure they're trying to double team him, but he split that gap and ran down the backside of the down line of scrimmage and caught the play from the backside. So nothing spectacular from Anthony Nelson so far. But it's real early, and it's not like he'll be pressed into duty this year, as long as sort of the top guys don't get injured. So we're going to move on to the offense. Lots of talk about Jameis Winston and how bad he's looked in camp. Correct. He hasn't looked any worse than any other quarterbacks. And once again, this goes back to the Todd Bowles defense, where they're just putting the screws to these guys. They are throwing everything at them. And like I said, it just looks like these guys have been together for so long, and it's almost instinctual where they know where everyone's going to be, and the communication's great, and they're and the offensive line doesn't know the last name of the guy. Well, I shouldn't say that because their names are on the back of their jerseys, but they've been together so few times, like they don't really know everyone's name yet. And it's not, and I'm not trying to say it's like a high school team against a pee wee team. I mean, the offense does have its fair share of positive plays. Uh, but with all these blitzes coming, from all different angles and all these formations, defensive formations they're seeing, and you know, they're really just putting the screws to the offensive line and they're putting the screws to Jameis Winston. So, would you like to see Jameis Winston sharper in camp? Absolutely. But it's not like he's terrible. It's right now. He really does. I know he can't get sacked or get hit, but he doesn't have any time. He really doesn't. He doesn't have any time. We don't really know what he's trying to do. At with that play at a certain time. Like I said, he's thrown his fair share of picks and he's had his fair share of good plays. So it's really it's just kind of like the way Winston practices. I talked about it last pod real quick. I've been to 30 plus practices, and Winston looks like Winston has always looked like, pretty much. So um, I really believe it'll something we will see, and it'll probably gradually as the offensive line catches up and the offense sort of catches up and starts to see this Todd Bowles defense, over and over and over, and will recognize quicker what's happening and be able to make the right play. It's not like these are like really dumb decisions, or he's not throwing into double coverage, not throwing into triple coverage. It's just really it's just about he doesn't have a lot of time. Um, and the first practice, when they weren't in pads, the first training camp practice, like Jameis would have to, he put his foot in the ground. I say that a lot this pod. Put his foot in the ground and look downfield. And if his first read wasn't there, he would have to move. They're not going to tackle him, but he'd have to, tuck the ball in a little bit and slide right and left and sort of step up in the pocket. But after he steps in the pocket, like the whole entire offensive line, defense line is behind him. So he has to wiggle his way through to be able to get enough space to actually throw the ball. So I saw that a lot of day one at training camp. So don't freak out about Winston. He hasn't been a world beater, but he's still of the three, now four, because Vinny Jr. is in town. Four quarterbacks that are throwing in camp, like he's easy. I wouldn't say easily looks the best. Him and Gabbard are pretty close, but it's you got to be picking hairs to sort of split hairs to decide which one's throwing the ball better. And Gabbert already knows this offense and has been in it for a year. So just calm down about Jameis Winston. The offensive line, once again, boo. The defense, these guys are just chewing them up and spitting them out, man. It's yesterday, no matter who was in there, no one could hold the left edge. The left tackle, whoever it was, like it was almost like they were invisible a lot of plays. Donovan Smith was still a little gimpy. He did come back. He was in pads. He did practice, but he didn't take as many reps as the first, quote unquote, starting offensive line. They put Beninock in there, and oh my god, it's you pull for the kid, and he's on the team, and you want him to do well, but he might be having the worst camp of any player, and maybe that's because I'm watching him a lot, because uh, I want to see if they can salvage him, from guard to tackle, but it's not good. It's just not. Like there are plays out there that he doesn't make that it really wouldn't have mattered if he was on the field or not. Like he's not getting a hand on guys sometimes. They're just going around him like he's invisible. So, uh, poor Caleb. He's not having a good camp. So let's hope they can coach him up and he can figure some things out. But the offensive line in whole, is not good. The run game is kind of non-existent, because of that defensive line. And when they do actually block it up, there's Levante David, making the tackle, and they are tackling. They're not tackling to the ground, but they're not doing that thud pop or pro hit where they just kind of hit the shoulder and that means you're down. Like they're grabbing and wrapping him up. They're just not taking him to the ground consistently. There have been players that have been tackled to the ground. oh god, somebody came up and thumped Rojo after he was like 15 yards downfield, and just put him right on his back. Uh, the when you see tackling to the ground, it tends to be the third slash fourth stringer guys. Like a running, like a linebacker. I'm not sure he was tackled. Anderson at a North Dakota State. I know I said South Dakota yesterday. At a North Dakota State, and they went to the ground, and that's it. And they get up and go. So the practices have been more physical for sure. One time, Whitehead came down and just separated OJ Howard from the ball, like it was a catch. But Whitehead got there a step right after the ball did, and boop, and brought the hammer down on him. He dropped it. The aggressiveness is good to see, and it was probably the most fun practice I've been to as far as entertainment wise. What's on the field, there's been some things in the stands, over the years that have been a lot of fun to be a part of as a fan. But as far as like just watching what was on the field, I think it's probably been my favorite practice to watch. Now, I don't know if it's because they did a lot of 11-on-11 drills, or it was just the intensity, or maybe I was just kind of focused in a little more, sort of getting, reacclimated to what I'm looking at and be able to know, where individual drills happen consistently. Because wide receivers are always there. The defensive line's always at one end. The offensive line's always at the other end. So maybe it's just me getting more comfortable. I don't know. But it was, like I said, it was probably my favorite practice that I saw. The running backs, Peyton Barber, talked about he looks strong. He does have some burst. I don't know, quote unquote, fast he is. Bruce Arians keeps saying he's not going to hit the home run. Probably not. But what Barber had a very good day doing, and thank God because they're going to need it, was picking up the blitz on the play action, and then he sort of settles down behind the offensive line and looks for the free guy, and gets over there and picks up the blitz, and he had a really good day doing that. And what do you know? When he did, Jameis threw a completion, and Rojo looks great. I did see him drop, an uncontested ball, and it wasn't 11-on-11s. It was just drills, and like I said yesterday, everyone's dropped passes. But he is, 100 times better. He looks 100 times better than he did last year in camp, and he's running hard instead of, sort of, remember Michael Pittman with the tappity tap tap tap, or Charles Sims with the tappity tap tap when they get to the line of scrimmage and looking for a hole. Rojo's hitting it. And I talked about how he just, Anthony Nelson had him dead to rights, in that hole, and he just kind of, just acted like he wasn't even there, and Miller was just grasping air. Like, he didn't even touch him. Not Miller, Nelson. Nelson didn't even touch him, and he ended up going downfield and picking up, like 20 yards for a first down. So Rojo's looking better, and he does look a lot better catching the ball. Last year, it felt like he was kind of fighting it. He'd catch the ball, but it didn't look natural. I guess you can compare it to the first time you ever drove, a manual or a stick shift, and then 2 months later, like compare those two, and that's Rojo is, the first time stick shift last year in camp and catching the ball, and now it's 2 months later where, it doesn't look like he's like catch the ball. Oh, good, okay, I caught it. Good. Oh, wait, now put it away. Everything's very fluid, and he just looks a lot better catching the ball. The tight ends are fine. Nothing really to talk about. They didn't throw a lot of passes to the tight ends yesterday. But Anthony Auclair is making this team. Like, he is their blocking tight end. He's like Alan Cross was last year, except instead of, playing the fullback H-back role where, he would be offset almost, just right behind the line of scrimmage, like right on the tackle's butt. Anthony Auclair is playing at the end of the line as a blocking tight end, and that's what he's doing, and he's in there with the starters, and it doesn't really even appear to be close about who the fourth guy is, as far as catching, and Anthony Auclair, if you go by reps. So I think Auclair is like firmly suited in there. So if any of you thought that, Hudson or Edinburger or Leggett was gonna come in and push for his job right now, it doesn't look like that way. Mike Evans, I'm not even gonna talk about him. He's Mike Evans. He looks fantastic. Chris Godwin, there's been a lot of talk about him since he was drafted, And a lot of people are like, whoa, you really got something there as a third round pick, and you can see it now. As far as passes over the middle, he's consistently getting the best separation, and that's hard to do because remember back, fans, uh, Adam Humphries was, we loved him as a slot receiver, but he didn't get a lot of separation, and Winston would have to throw some contested or very small window balls to Humphries, and usually get hit right away, the safety coming down on him, or the linebacker would get him. But with Chris Godwin over the middle, there's 2 yard separation. He's got it, and he has enough time to sort of make a move before the safety comes down on him. So I haven't seen him drop as many balls as he used to. That was something no one really talks about. Chris Godwin is that he'll drop an easy one in a game. I haven't seen that yet. Not that I hope it happens or I'm looking for it, but yeah, Chris Godwin just looks good. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about Scotty Miller. He's fast and he's quick, but as far as getting open deep, the 9 route, the fly route, he has the most separation than any wide receiver on these deep routes. Like, he has a good 2 yards plus every time he gets deep. With Mike Evans, he'll get by you, but you sort of got to throw it over the cornerback's shoulder and drop it in his breadbasket. And it's the same thing with Godwin. Miller, you got a little more playroom. If you don't want to overthrow him, he has a little more room to sort of slow up a half step to let the ball come to him and things like that. No one has so far has a chemistry with him. Balls tend to be underthrown or overthrown more than they are hitting the mark with him. But if Winston can get a chemistry like he has with Brate and he has with Mike Evans, and get in a groove with this Miller kid, my prediction of having the most yards per catch and 6 touchdowns, it's almost in the bag, because on the deep ball, he's open. I know I skipped Rashad Perriman. I just I don't know if I'm looking somewhere else when he's on the field or when they throw to him. I just really don't see him. I think before I sat down and did this pod, Byron Leftwich was just talking about him in his press conference and saying he's had an excellent camp. Well, I trust Byron Leftwich. He's just some guy that hasn't really been on my radar. And finally today, special teams. I like how the Bucs are doing this. Like, Santos kicks one day, and then Gay kicks the next, and Santos and Gay. And the Buccaneers were down doing, their red zone drills where they put the ball in the 10. They run about 20 plays to try to score touchdowns, and everyone was down there looking at that. And I was about to go down there, but then I saw Gay come out on the field, and basically he was warming up kicks for his actual quote-unquote competition when they actually line up and snap the ball and kick it. He was just out there with the long snapper and the holder. And, they started around 45, and they went back a little bit, and went back a little bit. They sort of settled in at 52 yards. And the first one, boop, makes it. Second one, boop, makes it. And the third one, now I don't know if this would have got over the offensive line or would have been blocked, but what he did was he just he decided to drive it. Instead of kick it up, and let it float down into the net, he decided to I'm going to see if I can put a hole through the side window of the practice facility. And he just uncorked it, and like I said, I don't know how high it was off the ground, but it was like a drive in golf. It started low and sort of started and was slowly going up. And I swear to you, I think the ball was still going up when it hit the net from 52 yards away. And the net's a little further back than it is on the outdoor. We were indoor yesterday because of a lightning scare again. And then he got his actual live time, where they snapped the ball and all the guys were on the field, and he made them all until they got back to a 61-yarder, which Santos hasn't tried yet. And 61 yards is what, 2 yards short of the NFL record? What's it, 63 now, 64, 65? I think it's 63. So it was just 2 yards short of that, and he didn't drive it like he did in the 52-yarder, but he put it out there. He missed it wide right, but it had plenty of leg, and of course we're all sad to see that he missed it, but from 61 yards, that length is not a problem for that kid. So that's sort of the special teams wrap up that happened. Oh, except they did do sort of a live punt. It was the first time that wasn't a quote unquote drill. And they didn't have anybody rushing, but they had all the 11 guys out there, and it was actually a live punt. And Dare Ugunblabwe, I think, was the personal protector. So that's good for him. Trying to make the team that he's in a very important spot on special teams is sort of like, once again, the quote-unquote first team punt coverage guys out there. And the guy that got his shot with the first live punt was Scotty Miller on returning, and he didn't. He just caught it, because, like I said, he was the only one out there on punt return. But that's just a little tidbit for you that Dare and Scotty Miller, are getting their shots, sort of, quote unquote, with the ones on the punt coverage and punt return teams. That's it, guys. I'll be back at practice today. It'll be day 3 of pads, and Brent driving up from Jacksonville. He's on the road right now. And so we'll have him, and I'm sure we'll sit down and we'll get some sound for him, and him and I will talk back and forth. So tomorrow's pod, we'll have a special guest that you all know and love, Brent Allen, and we'll talk some, training camp football. So, guys, I am going to take off. I'm going to have another cup of coffee, and then I'm going to pack my bag, get in my car, and go to training camp. See everybody tomorrow.
I was toting my pack along the dusty Winnemucca Road when along came a semi with a high and canvas-covered load. If you're going to Winnemucca Mac, with me you can ride. And so I climbed into the cab, and then I settled down inside. He asked me if I'd seen a road with so much dust and sand, and I said, listen, I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa.